All right, so obviously there's been a lot of discussion around Hunter's Gathering after the reveal, a lot of negative discussions and reactions to it. And I wasn't really sure that I really had a lot more to say on this after the first video that I did on it and then the stream discussion we had. I kind of think at this point we all sort of know where we stand on it, but then I realized there is actually more of a conversation to be had here. Some valuable, I think, ideas to put out there, and basically a constructive discussion to be had around changes that could be made to the game to help it succeed. Because I'm seeing a lot of talk of like, just cancel it, just focus on Horizon 3, maybe shift focus to making Steel Frontiers like the single Horizon multiplayer game. But I don't think canceling Hunter's Gathering is the only path forward. I also don't think it's necessarily the best path forward. And I'm not sure that focusing on Steel Frontiers is really the answer either. I think that could make sense for a lot of logical reasons, but I actually think there's a potentially better path forward. So what I want to do here is break down what I think that path is and lay it out for you guys to see what you think about it. But for that to make sense, first we need to talk about some things that could have been changed before the reveal that would have helped the game land a lot better, specifically characters, art style, and gameplay. And I think it's worth talking about these things now and actually productive to talk about them now, even ahead of this upcoming playtest, because I still believe, and I know most of you still really believe, that these things need to change pretty dramatically for this game to have a good chance at success ultimately. So while I'm still pretty critical of Hunter's Gathering, my goal here is to be more optimistic and at least come up with a hypothetical path we could go down where the game could appeal to a lot more people. Because none of us truly want Guerrilla to fail at making a Horizon co-op game. I mean, I guess there's maybe some toxic people out there that like get off on seeing other people fail. But the vast majority of us, even if your stance is, I'd rather see this game just get canceled and then get Horizon 3 as soon as possible, the vast majority of us, I think, still would rather see Guerrilla succeed with both games, have a successful Horizon co-op game and Horizon 3. I think that's the best possible outcome, and I still believe that that is possible. So I want to start by talking about characters, but I also just wanted to say at the top here that I know the people at Guerrilla are probably really stressed right now. Our brains aren't really evolved to handle the level of negativity being thrown at them. So to anyone at Guerrilla who might watch this, I just want to say that I feel for you guys, and I hate that all this negativity is being directed at you right now. And that there are literally millions of Horizon fans, including myself, that of course still want you to succeed. We want to be on your side. We want to support you by buying your games. It's just the vast majority of us want something very different than what Hunter's Gathering looks like right now. Okay, let's talk about characters. So this is the biggest flashpoint, I think, for sure around the game. And the biggest problem is they just don't resonate with people for the most part. And there's two reasons for that, I think. The first one is we don't know who these characters are. They're brand new. And the second one is they don't really seem to fit in with the canon, the established canon of the Horizon universe. So I polled you guys on this and I asked, in Hunter's Gathering, which would you prefer to play as? Only 6% of people said that they would prefer to play as a cast of all new characters, which is what it looks like the game has right now, right? 24% said they'd rather play as existing characters like Aaron, Talana, Katalo, etc. 44% said a mix of existing and new characters. So together, that's like 68% want at least the option to play as existing characters from the Horizon universe. Again, like Aaron, Talana, Katalo, people like that. And then I think it's also worth mentioning here that 27%, that's a pretty sizable chunk of people, said that they would rather actually make their own player avatar. Now, I actually think I'd prefer that myself, being able to make my own player avatar. Maybe the game won't really work that well without predefined characters, but I think it'd be cool to be able to make my own player avatar and then go on quests, maybe in the story mode of the game, which they say they have, they're just not revealing yet, and go on quests with existing characters like Talana and like Aaron, basically in the same way that you go on quests with them as Aloy in the main games, but I would get to go on quests with them as my own player avatar. And having a player avatar doesn't necessarily mean you have to give up having character classes, which is what it looks like these predefined characters are right now. Like they have specific types of combat classes. You can have a player avatar and still need to choose a class for the avatar. But that's all I'll say about custom avatars for now. Let's talk about these pre-existing characters. So I think part of the problem with not feeling connected with these characters is just simply the art style that they're done in. But there's other aspects of them that I think are causing an issue. Like, for example, the fact that they can fly around with these like superhero type abilities. It just doesn't feel grounded in the Horizon universe. Aloy is the superhero of this universe, and you can't out superhero your superhero. Otherwise, like, they're not special anymore. right? Especially when we're being told that this game is canon. So like Sun here, for example, if I just rewind that, the fact that she can sort of fly around in the air, how do we explain that with the existing technology of this world? I mean, maybe there is an explanation for that through the story campaign that we just haven't seen yet, but the way it comes across in the trailer is just that these characters have wild abilities that don't feel grounded in the Horizon world, and also in some ways like outdo Aloy, which doesn't feel great. Another good example is this lady. She seems to have some kind of force field ability that looks really powerful. And there are force fields in the Horizon universe, so maybe you could say, well, she found some kind of shield weaver armor the same way that Aloy did, and she can use it to blast through enemies like this. But the thing is, this force field ability looks way more powerful than anything that Aloy can do once again, and I don't really want to erode Aloy's status as like the superhero of this universe. And her force field it also just kind of doesn't feel grounded in the established Horizon canon. Even Rem here, who I would argue is one of the more grounded characters because he at least has a bow, he's able to do these wild, let me see if I can find it. He's able to like zip around in the air and levitate. Yeah, right here. So he's able to like float up into the air and shoot his bow really fast, like with this magical ability that just feels unbelievable for anything that's possible in this world. So the characters and their abilities straying too far from what's possible in the established Horizon canon, I think is definitely one problem. Another problem, again, is just that we have no connection to these characters because they're brand new, which is one of the more confusing decisions to me because they had a pre-existing roster of really compelling characters that they could have pulled from, and for some reason they chose not to. Like, just take a couple of obvious ones, Talana and Erend. Imagine if Talana and Erend were in this lineup as playable characters. I know that wouldn't fix everything about this game by just doing that, but I mean, come on, people would love to play as Erend and Talana, and I think it would also help make the game instantly recognizable as Horizon. And I actually think it would be way easier to integrate existing characters into this game and have it still be canon and like fit with the story of the main games, as opposed to trying to figure out how to get these new characters to fit in. Hunter's Gathering is a settlement on the Zero Dawn map. Like, it's a pre-existing location. So it is totally realistic that Erend or Talana or anybody else that we've ever met could make their way to this settlement like near the Norlands. And at the end of Forbidden West, characters like Erend and Talana are actually already heading back east. So if the narrative premise of this game is Hephaestus is back on the Cauldron Network, it's more pissed off than ever, the machines are more dangerous and more powerful than ever, which that's exactly what it is because that's what they explained in the trailer. We need hunters to hold off these more powerful machines. Well, the Sunhawk of the Hunter's Lodge would 1000% be there for that. Talana would be all over that. And I actually think that that narrative premise is really good. It's just, I'd much rather be engaging in that as either my own player avatar or pre-existing characters like Talana and Erend and others. And with Erend, well, we've got this hammer character here, Axel, and it's kind of just like, why? Like, why is Erend handing over the hammer to this guy? Why can't we just play as Erend? Like, why can't Erend be the hammer character? It just doesn't make sense to me. And there's just tons of pre-existing characters that I'd rather play as instead of these new ones. Like, let's take this lady for again. Obviously, her role is supposed to be like some kind of strong female tank character, right? That's fine. Great. Let's have a strong female tank character. I have no problem with that. How about Petra? Petra's a strong lady. She also has a really cool cannon weapon that she made in Zero Dawn. Why can't we play as Petra as the strong female character? Why do we have to play as this new character? It just doesn't really seem to add anything. And it actually seems to take quite a bit away to introduce these brand new characters. But instead, we can see that Petra's actually just been reduced to an NPC merchant here at the camp, which honestly kind of feels like a snub to the main games. It just doesn't make sense. If you want a recognizable character as a merchant, why not use like, I don't know, Della and Boomer, the boomstick ladies from Forbidden West? Or you could do Bergrun from the Frozen Wilds. He's already basically a trader merchant character. He'd be great as an NPC merchant if you want a recognizable character. Or you could use Karst, the merchant that Aloy trades with at the beginning of Zero Dawn. Like, there's just so many other options. Why would you relegate Petra to just be a merchant when she could be the powerful female class character that we play as a playable character? If you don't like Petra being the strong female character, how about like Vanasha? Vanasha's got like the best abs in the franchise. She would be fantastic. really cool character that people would love to spend more time with and play as. You could also go for Varga, the girl in the Frozen Wilds that helps you upgrade the specialty weapons. Like, there's just so many options here if you want a strong female tank character to pick from existing characters. There just doesn't seem to be a reason to make a brand new one. Or maybe this woman is supposed to be representative for disabled people because she has a peg leg. Well, that's fine. Guess what? You've already got a disabled character from the main games. His name is Katalo. Everybody loves him. Everybody would love to play as him. He's got a badass robotic arm. He's also just generally a badass and kind of a heartthrob for the ladies. Like, why can't we play as Katalo if we want a disabled character? He's super cool. He's already in the canon. Like, it just doesn't make sense to have these new characters. And if the counter argument is, oh, well, the voice actors for Katalo and Erend and Talana are too expensive, well, just take a look at the voice actor lineup for Marathon. Marathon is a extraction shooter live service game that doesn't even have a story mode. And they literally have Jennifer English, Ben Starr, Roger Clark, and just like a bunch of other people stacked voice acting cast lineup for an extraction shooter that does not even have a story mode. Okay, let's also talk about this Banuk kid. At least I think he's supposed to be Banuk. Not really sure because he's not wearing a lot of clothing, which makes 0 sense for a Banuk. It's freaking cold in Banuk territory. They wear a lot of furs. They wear a lot of layers. If he was Tanakh Sky Clan, maybe I'd buy this. But yeah, if he's supposed to be Banuk, his whole outfit needs to look completely different. Cabling, lots more machine parts. Also, a little bit of a side detour here, but a lot of people have pointed out that Axel has like what looks like a tiger pelt that he's got here. This isn't a huge thing, but that is kind of a concerning detail because it's well established within this universe that there are not any large mammals on Earth anymore. Now, maybe you could say, well, Gaia's reintroduced them now that she has control over the biosphere again or whatever. Maybe that's explained through the story campaign, but it's just kind of a concerning detail when we say that this is supposed to be canon, right? Like, how does he have this tiger pelt? Also, in general, a lot of these characters, their outfits just don't incorporate very much in the way of machine components, which is like basically a core part of the aesthetic of the Horizon games, right? Even the Karja, who wear a lot of silks and fabrics, they usually have at least a little bit of machine stuff woven into their outfits. And like Sun, I think she's supposed to be Karja, doesn't really have any of that here. And the other characters don't really either. Like this stealth character or whatever she is, like her whole outfit, it looks like Japanese robes almost. I have also seen people mention the hair dye thing, like the fact that Sun has bright pink hair not being realistic for this world. That's true. I'm willing to kind of suspend belief for that because the Tanakh use a lot of dyes. The Nora do a lot of face painting. The Tanakh also like paint a lot of stuff. The Banuk paint a lot of stuff. So I'm kind of willing to allow hair dyes in this world. That doesn't bother me too much, but it is kind of in the same vein as the tiger pelt, like another detail that just makes it feel less grounded in the Horizon world. But yeah, overall, I think these characters like just aren't it. People aren't connecting with them. The abilities they have don't feel grounded in the Horizon world. And it seems like a real big missed opportunity when you have such a strong roster of pre-existing characters that we could be playing as instead, or allow us to make our own player avatars. Real quick, some other pre-existing characters that would be really fun to play as. Sona, Varl's mom, who's now lost both her son and daughter. What a narratively rich character to play around with. Nil, talk about a heartthrob with Katalo. The ladies love Nil. Give him Nil. He's also kind of a badass, so he'd be cool to play as. Ikri from the Frozen Wilds would be one of my personal top favorite picks. She's a super proficient hunter. She's done hunting with Aloy. She also has kind of an unfinished story. I think she would be really cool as a playable character. You've also got Arktix from the Frozen Wilds, like the chieftain guy that you meet when you first get there. He's obviously a very powerful hunter and would make a lot of sense as a playable character too. And there's just so many more. Maybe comment below your top picks for existing characters that you would like as playable characters. But let's talk about the art style. I think after the characters, the art style is the next biggest thing that people have a problem with. I polled you guys on this as well, and almost half of you said you don't like it at all. It's one of the things driving you away, which sucks because that's going to be a big thing for them to change. That takes a lot of work to change, I think. And they've put a lot of time and effort into this already, but I think it just kind of like where we're at right now is something's going to have to change with this art style to make it resonate with more people, I think. The reality is the impression people get from this art style is Fortnite, Overwatch, Clash of Clans, mobile game. That's just like the gut reaction. And even if it's not technically true, like this doesn't actually look like Fortnite if you put them side by side, but that's people's gut reaction. And that's kind of like what you have to deal with. So to be commercially viable, I think it has to shift quite a bit. Now, I've seen some people make the argument that the art style has to be a lot more simplified like this because it's a multiplayer game and it needs to be performant. And that is true, I'm sure, to some extent, but it cannot be a technical limitation because there are plenty of multiplayer games out there, online multiplayer games, that use a much more realistic art style than this. Arc Raiders, Battlefield 6, The Division, Ghost Recon, there's a bunch of them. So the art style does not have to be more simplified. I've also seen some people say like, wait a second, people are excited for this new Kena game, the sequel to Kena Bridge of Spirits, but that's like a Pixar style, like kind of kid style looking game. How come people are excited for that, but they're not excited for Hunter's Gathering? And the answer to that is because this is the style of the Kena franchise. This is what the first game looked like. So we're getting more of what we already had come to expect from Kena. This is just the art style of the franchise. But Hunter's Gathering looks not only like it's not that it's, if it were a stylized version of the main games, maybe that would be one story. But Hunter's Gathering doesn't even look like a stylized version of the main games. It just looks like a completely different game. So even if the art style of Hunter's Gathering is like objectively good, it kind of doesn't matter because the impression it's giving the vast majority of people is, why did they try to turn Horizon into Fortnite? Okay, so what should the art style be? Well, the simple answer is to make it look as close as possible to the main games, right? And Steel Frontiers, the mobile game from NCSoft, looks like it's able to do that pretty well. I'm kind of like holding final judgment on that until we actually see more of this game, because a lot of what we saw in this trailer were cinematics, and obviously, like, I just want to see more of this before I'm ready to pass final judgment on that. But basically, one answer here is make the game look as close as possible to the main Horizon games. But I'm actually not totally against the idea of the game looking somewhat stylized. I think there's advantages to having it look distinct from the main games and also look distinct from anything else out there. But that's the key. It needs to look distinct from anything else. And right now, unfortunately, it just gives way too much of the Fortnite Overwatch vibe. So even though it might objectively be different from other games out there, that's not the impression that it's giving, and impressions are everything. It doesn't really matter what the objective truth is. It's how people feel that matters, and they feel that this is like trying to be way too close to Fortnite. So in my opinion, it either needs to look much closer to the main Horizon games, or they need to figure out a different stylized look that's more distinct and also appeals to a more mature audience. I think that's really important too. The main games actually already appeal to a pretty young audience. I can't tell you how many times people have commented on my videos telling me that like their kids love to watch them play Horizon because of the robot dinosaurs. And also it's like this bright, vibrant world already, which kids like. So I don't think you actually have to do very much to make Horizon appeal to a younger audience. So yeah, a new art style or a really big shift is definitely a massive, massive challenge for them to figure out. I don't even know if it's really feasible for them to go down that path, honestly. But I think it kind of has to happen to some degree. Like at least the current art style needs to be pushed as far as possible towards the main Horizon games at a minimum. But let's talk about gameplay. This isn't talked about as much as the characters and the art style, but in my opinion, this is actually the most important part, because if the gameplay itself isn't fun, then it kind of doesn't matter what the art style or characters look like. The thing is, this is obviously also the part that we know the least about. They did actually show a fair amount of gameplay within this reveal trailer, but it's just really hard to get a sense of how it actually plays. People within the upcoming playtest are going to get a sense for that, obviously, but only a relatively small number of people are going to get into that, and it's going to be under NDA. I did play it in the playtest that I went to, but I can't talk about that, and I also honestly have no idea how much they've changed since when I played it. But we can still get a pretty decent idea from the trailer, and the big thing that sticks out to me is the fact that it looks very, very melee heavy. So there was only one character shown using a bow. Everybody else was shown doing various types of melee attacks and using various types of melee weapons. And so that is something that I'm pretty concerned about. I polled you guys on this too, and only 2% said they would prefer more of a focus on melee. 21% said they want more of a focus on range, like the main games, and 41% said roughly an even mix of melee and range. This poll, I did include an option to say I'm just not interested in Hunter's Gathering, but even, I'm not going to show you the math, but even if you remove that, the more focused on melee option only goes up to 3% of the remaining people. So basically everyone who is interested in Horizon Co-op either feels it should be more heavily focused on range, like the main games, or should be like an even split between melee and range. And that's just not what we're seeing in the trailer. Now, maybe there are more ranged combat options that people will get to see in the playtest or that will eventually be implemented, but right now, from what they're showing us, it looks like 80 to 90% melee combat. And I think if they had more ranged options, or they were planning to have more ranged options, they probably would have showed it to us here, or at least it would have been good for them to have showed it to us here. And the problem with that is it doesn't feel like Horizon, and it also doesn't look particularly unique to me. Maybe it will feel fun to play and unique to play, but it doesn't really look that way. And it's also just not what Horizon Combat is about at all, right? You don't run up to machines, these super big, dangerous machines, and just whack them to death with a hammer or something. You have to be strategic. You have to be tactical. Maybe you're going to be stealthy if you want to be stealthy, but you have to use your smarts to figure out how to take these machines down. And I'm not even saying that the game has to support stealth. I think it probably should, because a lot of Horizon players are going to want that option. But even if it doesn't have stealth, what's more important than that, in my opinion, is the precision of being able to target components and weak points, tear off different weapons so that you disable certain enemy attacks, apply different elemental status effects by like triggering canisters on the machines. All of that really detailed, unique stuff that you can do in the main games is really core to what makes Horizon Combat unique and really compelling. Now, maybe some of that is in there and we're just not seeing it in the trailer. But again, I think if they had those things, they would have made sure to show it, and they didn't. So I'm pretty skeptical that those types of things are actually in the game. It's also mentioned a few times in the trailer that the game is roguelite, which means you're going to run the same missions over and over again. You're going to get perks and gear and stuff like that as you go through that instance of the mission. And you're going to kind of get stronger as you go. But then once the mission is over, you're going to lose most of that stuff. So a big question for me here is like, what does the overall progression look like that transcends mission? Like, what is the meta progression, right? Do we just come out of these missions with shards that we then use to buy things from merchants? Or what do we buy from the merchants? There may be something there, but I really want to know what the meta progression is, because that's huge for retention. With a game like this, you need people to want to sink like hundreds or even thousands of hours into it, literally. And so some kind of overall account progression is really important. And it's got to be more than just like leveling your character up and making them like have more damage output. Like there's got to be a gear grind or acquiring new gear or something like that that makes you want to come back and keep grinding the same things over and over again, because otherwise it's going to get boring really quickly. Okay, so where do we go from here? Everything I just went over, changing characters, art styles, making big changes potentially to the gameplay mechanics, all of those things are going to take a lot of time and a lot of money. And they've already spent a lot of time and money on this game. This isn't some small side project. I'm not going to bore you with the math, but you can make some reasonable estimates based on how many people work at Guerrilla, the fact that they're in Amsterdam, how long they've been working on this game. They've probably spent somewhere in the ballpark of like 100 to 150 million on this already, something like that. So there's really only three options. They can keep going down the path that they're on right now and, you know, maybe tweak it based on some playtest feedback and things like that, but basically keep going down the path that they're on right now and then launch it. Unfortunately, I think if they do that, they're not going to sell anywhere near enough copies. And I also don't think that they're going to get enough recurring, like dedicated players in there to make that worth it from a financial standpoint. The thing with live service games, and especially a big one like this, is you need to have literally hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people interested in it so that they eventually funnel down into a core player base that plays the game over and over and over again of like hundreds of thousands of people, literally, in order for it to be financially viable. And I just don't know where they're going to get the audience for that right now. Maybe I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. You know, I want Guerrilla to be successful with all of their endeavors, but they're clearly alienating existing Horizon fans with this. And I don't know what other games they're going to be able to pull together an audience from, at least not a big enough one. So then option 2 is simply cancel it. Cut their losses, move on to Horizon 3, maybe focus on getting Steel Frontiers onto PlayStation and making that like the one multiplayer Horizon game, because Steel Frontiers is not currently planned to be on PlayStation. It's only on mobile and then on PC. And on PC, it's not even supposed to be on Steam. It's on NCSoft's Purple launcher or whatever that is. But, they could put Steel Frontiers on PlayStation and make it available to people. So that is an option. So in a lot of ways, that does make logical sense to shift the focus to Steel Frontiers being the single Horizon multiplayer game. But I'm not a big fan of that option for a few reasons. The art style does look a lot closer to the main games. There are also gameplay elements that I like in Steel Frontiers, like, for example, this grappling around with, I assume, a polecaster. I think that's really cool. That was really fun in Forbidden West, and being able to do that in Steel Frontiers is really awesome. There's also a character creator in Steel Frontiers, which I think is pretty cool. But I am pretty concerned that the combat system here does still look really, really melee focused. I'm not against melee combat. I'm just worried that it's not going to really feel that unique and fun in the long run to just keep beating up machines with various melee weapons. They do show a bit of ranged combat in this trailer, which is good, but it is like clearly very heavily melee focused. And I just don't know how fun that's going to be in the long run. The other thing you have to remember here is this is a melee focused game. They have to design this assuming that most people are playing it on a phone with their thumbs on the screen, not with some kind of attachment or something like that. So they just can't design it in a way where it requires any level of like precision for the combat system to work. They have to assume you're playing it on a phone. So I worry that it's not going to really be that fun of a combat system. And we also don't really know like what the overall progression is in this game. It's supposed to be an MMORPG. So there's got to be some kind of level grinding. I don't know if it's just going to be like generic level grinding to increase your character's power level or what, or if it's going to be like a gear grind or something. But we don't know about that. So I'd love to learn more about that. And then the other thing is MMOs generally don't have any kind of like deep narrative storytelling, at least not the type that you would find in the main Horizon games. And so I don't expect to see that here. Being able to mount things, like there's cool elements of this. Being able to mount a machine's weapon on your mount is really cool there. But yeah, overall, I'm just still not that optimistic that Steel Frontiers is going to be way better than Hunter's Gathering. So I'm not really a big fan of like saying, let's just cancel Hunter's Gathering and shift all focus to Steel Frontiers. So here's the third option. It is not an easy option, but it is the option that I'm most in favor of. And that is you pivot Hunter's Gathering and turn it into something that Horizon fans actually want. I polled you guys and I asked, is there any form of Horizon co-op that you would like to play? And 61% of you said that you'd be interested in Horizon co-op if it were more like Zero Dawn and Forbidden West. There was also 15% of you that said you'd be interested in co-op as a side mode in Horizon 3, and 6% said that they like what they're seeing in Hunter's Gathering. And I would argue that 6% and this 15%, most of those people would probably also still be interested in a Horizon co-op that looks more like Zero Dawn or Forbidden West. There were only 18% of you that said, no, I'm not interested in any kind of Horizon co-op experience at all. Now, obviously, my audience skews pretty hard towards like diehard Horizon fans. You guys are mostly single player gamers. Maybe you have one or two multiplayer live service games that you enjoy. But for the most part, most people that are responding to these polls and who watch my content are people who like really just play single player games exclusively or for the most part. And I think if anything, that actually underscores the point even more. The point being, the core idea of having a live service Horizon co-op multiplayer game is not a bad one. It's actually a very good one because there are literally like millions of Horizon fans who would be interested in that. But the key is it needs to look and play a lot more like Zero Dawn and Forbidden West. So how would option 3 work? How would a pivot work? Well, there's no getting around the fact that that's going to cost a lot more money and a lot more time. But I don't think it necessarily has to be as bad as it sounds. It could look like this. Scale down the Hunter's Gathering team back to a smaller size who can rework the vision into something that is closer to the main games. Take the extra people and move them over to Horizon 3. Make that the focus and get that out as soon as possible, obviously without compromising its quality. And then after you validated that the new direction for Hunter's Gathering actually resonates with people, then you scale the team back up and get it shipped in another 2 years or whatever it takes. And maybe in this scenario, Horizon 3 actually comes out before Hunter's Gathering. That might actually be best. Now, obviously, I'm making a lot of assumptions here, the big one being that Horizon 3 is actually ready to take on a bigger team. It might not be. It just might not be at that point yet. In which case, scaling down the Hunter's Gathering team would obviously, unfortunately, mean layoffs, which we obviously want to avoid. So they're going to have to figure that out. But my point here is, if you can scale down the Hunter's Gathering team, you could spend like a year or two and probably only like 10 to 15 million or something, figuring out a new direction for Hunter's Gathering, and then scale back up when you validated that that's actually a good direction. And then, of course, after that, they'd need to spend like 100 million or something to get it out the door, but that's not actually as crazy as it might sound. Even though this whole Sony live service thing has been a big mess, they're not wrong that if you can get it right, a live service game can make a shitload of money. Helldivers 2 proved that to them. That game reportedly cost somewhere in the ballpark of like $100 million to make, but it sold 20 million copies, and the profit estimates are like way over 500 million right now. And that game is just going to keep printing money for years to come. So my point is, even if you sink like 300 million into Hunter's Gathering to get it where it needs to be, if it's successful, it can still make a lot of money. And let's be honest, there's quite a few of us out there as Horizon fans who would be more than willing to pay a good chunk of money every year for narrative expansions to the story mode that adds more canon and more lore to the Horizon universe, especially if we get to play as characters like Talana or Erend or something like that. And I think plenty of us would also be happy to pay for things like cosmetics for weapons and outfits and dyes for our outfits, like you can dye outfits in Forbidden West and stuff like that. So I think it's viable. It just has to be very different. So I still believe Hunter's Gathering can succeed in a pretty big way. They're going to have to make some big changes to make that happen. And I don't know if Guerrilla or Sony are going to be willing to do that. But I think there is a path forward here that's both profitable for them and gets us what we want as Horizon fans. But the best thing we can do now is give them honest, detailed feedback in the playtest that's coming up. So I will leave the sign up link for that down below. There's probably not a whole lot more time to sign up for it. So if you do want to get in there, go sign up for the playtest. Of course, I'm also really curious to hear what you guys think about these ideas in the comments. Appreciate you guys watching as always, and I'll catch you in the next one.